Hare Krishna. Praise to Srila Prabhupada, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Reading today from the third canto, chapter 16, verses 1 to 12. 12. Okay, with 6 is the. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya.
Narayanam Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Tato Jayamudirayat.
Tato Jayamudirayat.
Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu.
Nasta Prayeshu.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke.
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki.
Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God, unto Narayana, Rishi, who is the most human being. Today, the author and Srila Prabhupada, the translator and commentator. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart almost completely destroyed. Unto the personality of Godhead, whose praise, transcendental songs is established as a remarkable fact. Hare Krishna. So chapter 16 is entitled The Two Doorkeepers of Vaikuntha, Jai and Vijay, cursed by the, must be the Kumaras. It's not right. Anyway. Cursed by the sages. Okay. Text 1. There you go. Okay, would you like to start?
Lord Brahma said, after thus congratulating the sages for their nice words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose abode is in the kingdom of God, spoke as follows.
Personality of Godhead said, these attendants of mine, Jai and Vijay, by name, have committed a great offense against you because of ignoring me.
O great sages, I approve of the punishment that you, who are devoted to me, have meted out to them.
Okay, let's take a little pause right there. Thank you. So, remembering the situation, what was the situation? What was happening for this previous chapter? Just to focus in. Yes, would you like to say?
Sure. Some little appearing to be 5-year-old boys came up to the gate of a Vaikuntha planet, and they were or they wanted to see Lord Vishnu, but the guards were like, you guys are little boys, you have to wait.
They got through a little bit though, didn't they? They got in, you know, and there was a description, I believe it was in the last chapter, the description of how little children go everywhere without being checked. They just opened every door that they could. They went through 6 gates previously, or 7 gates previously. 8, sorry. They were stopped by the doorkeepers because they thought, who are these little kids? And what were they dressed like?
Naked, birthday suit.
Air. They were dressed by the air. Thanks. Exactly. Okay, let's go on. Oh, so then what happened? What happened? Okay, so the gatekeeper stopped them. So then what happened? What was the situation that is ensued? Do you have a little mic or a big mic? Can we pass the mic down? Thanks. Thank you.
They cursed Jai and Vijay, and then Lord Vishnu showed up and gave us his judgment.
Well, almost, but not quite. Who cursed who? You're right. Actually, I just thought it through.
The four
okay.
Kumars cursed Jai and Vijay.
And what was their reason for their curse? Do you remember that, the way it was phrased? Anyone else remember Advaita Prabhu? Do you remember the circumstance? Anytime I call you and if I say the wrong name, can you please correct me right away?
They said, what is this? Like, what the world is
Supposed to be free from duality.
Yeah. And they also said, how do you think an enemy could get here? An
Yeah.
enemy couldn't even enter into Vaikuntha. Okay. And then they also said, if you're seeing duality, then you belong to, you need to go to the world where there's duality, right and wrong, good and bad, this and that. There's no duality in the spiritual world because there's no bad qualities. Everyone has to have such pure heart and pure qualities that can't enter. Okay, so
It was interesting, actually. There was
Stopped after the 6 gates.
yeah,
So how do they pass 6 gates and then on 7 they get checked? That's
yeah.
kind of peculiar.
It's peculiar, and it also hints of the plan of the Lord. You know what I mean? All these peculiar things that happen that, you know, we can explain them to a certain point, but then we have to add that the Lord's desire factor in. Lord's desire, he had a plan. Remember what or desire. Do you remember what was it expressed in the last chapter what the Lord's desire was?
one fight.
Yeah. And so, and he couldn't fight in Vaikuntha because everyone's there so devoted to him. So he had to arrange a circumstance that is devotees. Okay, so that's where we're at. And the Lord just said, I approve of the punishment that you've meted out to them. I approve it. He said to the Kumaras. Interestingly enough, oh, actually, I'll be quiet now. Go on from a few more verses, and then I'll talk some more. Whose ever turn would like to take you?
To me, the Brahmana is the highest and most beloved personality. The disrespect shown by my attendants has actually been displayed by me because the doormen are my servitors. I take this to be an offense by myself. Therefore, I seek your forgiveness for the incident that has arisen.
So let's think about this verse for a minute while I remember to offer my prayers to Prabhupada, which I tend to forget. Sorry. Omaginachi midandasya jananjana salakaya chaksu umintamjena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master very kindly forced open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I beg for service for him, life after life. Hare Krishna. Okay, so what's your takeaway from text number 4? Can you put the whole? You can't get all of it up there at once, right? You can get most of it. Okay. Can someone? Yes, Prabhu.
My initial,
Microphone,
oh,
because you have so many nice people listening.
Check.
Yeah, thanks.
My initial thing was a good leader takes responsibility for his employees or his servants. So he blamed himself.
Yeah, he takes the responsibility. And we can see in this day and age, it's exactly the opposite situation. A boat crashes into boat crashes into a bridge, and everybody tries to think who's to blame. Not me. It's the boat company. It's the this, it's the that. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Just take any situation, and it's not me. It's this or that, or the circumstances, or whatever. But actually, the ideal situation for an ideal leader, a just, religious, morally sound leader, is that they take responsibility. Can you remember an incident? Are you familiar enough with Srila Prabhupada's pastimes that, can you remember an incident in Prabhupada's life previous to coming to America where he had to take responsibility for something that happened? I'm almost telling you the story. I didn't hear you. Can't even see. Okay, all right. So there was one incident when he had his pharmaceutical business where something happened that the compound that his employees made was incorrect, and it came up in court, and Prabhupada had to deal with it, and he took responsibility because it was his manufacturing responsibility that things would come out properly. And anyway, it's just another little incident. small incident where people of high caliber, they take responsibility for things that they're in charge of. Okay. But it takes it to another level when it's the Supreme Lord saying, I accept the responsibility. I consider that I was the one who offended you. Another level. Okay, number 5, please.
A wrong act committed by a servant leads people in general to blame his master, just as a spot of white leprosy on any part of the body pollutes all of the skin.
Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing, through the ear, the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without doubt. Therefore, I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you.
Can you remind me, are we supposed to focus on 6 or 7? 7. Okay, no, it's all right. Okay, but this verse also, how does this verse strike you? What is Krishna saying here, or the Lord saying here in this text number 6? It's very interesting, and sometimes you can miss the point, or some of the points. What's he saying there? Especially this one. Now you have realized me without a doubt. Therefore, I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. He's making a comparison there. He's comparing his dear servants, Jai and Vijay, to like his arms. And he's prepared to lop off his arm if it is considered hostile to you. It's been hostile. So their activities. So in other words, Krishna is saying, these are my very dear servants. He's not saying, yeah, I want them out of here. These are they're as dear to me as my arm, my legs, my eyes, this is how I function. And I'm prepared to do that. So it's indicating, isn't it indicating that there's it's not like a cut and dry situation here. The sages were offended and the Kumaras had the right. And so the Kumaras, now another thing he said right before that, he talks about hearing, if he takes back, okay, even a low person, if he lives by eating dogs, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear, the glorification of my name. So that's what the Kumaras, that's where not that they were low or anything, but they were not, the Kumaras at this particular point were not pure devotees. They were transcendentalists. They were very advanced. But they were thinking, they were Brahmanandis. Brahmanandis and Mayavadis, there's a tweak there. They're different. Brahmanandis think that Brahman is, they recognize that there's a personal form of God, but they think that Brahman is higher. Realization of the one absolute truth is a higher realization than realizing the Brahman realization. Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we understand that or even Srimad Bhagavatam talks about Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan realization. The highest realization is to understand that God is the supreme person, and he is in the heart of all living entities, and he has impersonal energies that are spread throughout the universe. So it's 1, 2, 3. If you realize number 3, you've got 2 and 1 already understood. But they had it in a different order. They were thinking that, yes, there is a personality of Godhead, but beyond and above and more advanced understanding is to realize everything from God. But they were curious to meet Lord Narayan. So, okay. So then it says they were, but because they had come to Vaikuntha, so they were purified. They were, very advanced. Okay, because they had come to Vaikuntha with the aim, with the desire to see the Lord, and the Lord fulfilled their desire. Because even though the gatekeeper said, "Don't, you can't come in, you can't go see him," he came on his 2 lotus feet, and they saw his lotus feet, and also he was accompanied by the goddess of fortune, but that'll be mentioned later on. But anyway, he came, and when they saw him and saw his attractive features, and they could smell the fragrance of the tulsi leaves and his lotus feet, which is not something that, it's a special quality that was so fragrant and so attractive. Then they became attracted to the personality of Godhead. And then they were purified and realized their conceptions in the proper, order, say. Yeah, okay, let's go on. 7, I think we're up to 7. Whatever turn it is.
The Lord continued, because I am the servitor of my devotees. My lotus feet have become so sacred that they immediately wiped out all sin, and I've acquired such a disposition that the goddess of fortune does not leave me, even though I have no attachment for her, while others praise her beauty and observe sacred vows to secure her even a slight favor.
We'll obviously talk about this a little bit later, but let's continue on with our storyline here. Number 8.
By the oblations offered by the sacrifices in the sacrificial fire, which is one of my own mouths, with the same relish as I do the delicacies overflowing with ghee, which are offered to the mouths of the Brahmanas, who have dedicated to me the results of their activities, and who are ever satisfied with my prasad.
Okay, so just regressing back to text 7, it says, because I'm the servitor of my devotees. Who can remember the Sanskrit? How Krishna serves for the term Krishna's the servant of his devotees. He's the well-wisher of his devotees. Begins with bhakta. Bhakta what? Bhakta vatsala. He's the well-wisher of the devotees. And this is how now in 7, he's expressing it like that. I am so concerned, and I am so dedicated to my devotees that, that I'll do anything for them. And we won't get too distracted. Okay, well, I'm already distracted. Okay, let's go on. 9.
I am the master of my unobstructed internal energy, and the water of the Ganges is the remnant left after my feet are washed. That water sanctifies the 3 worlds, along with Lord Shiva, who bears it on his head. If I can take the dust of the feet of the Vaishnava on my head, who will refuse to do the same? Okay,
so let's remember this in relation to what's happening. So there the Kumars just cursed the gatekeepers of the Lord. And in the Lord came, goddess of fortune came, etc., etc. And the Lord saying, I take responsibility. But he's also indicating these servitors of mine are as dear to me as my arms. But if my arms have been offensive, I'll cut them off. So he's giving like 2 messages there, isn't he? He's saying, yes, I understand that you got upset and you cursed the Brahmas, and I accept that, but these were very dear servants. So he's saying both things. And the Kumars are getting a little bit, not in our series of verses today, but probably in your tomorrow's class. They're getting a little bewildered because the Lord's saying 2 things at the same time. So he's saying that my lotus feet, the water that sanctifies my lotus feet, purifies the 3 worlds. And if I can take the dust of a Vaishnava on my head, who will refuse to do the same? Jai and Vijay were Vaishnavas, obviously, servants, personal servants of the Lord, and they could have taken the dust of their feet of Jai and Vijay's feet on the Kumars, could have taken the dust on their head, and Krishna says, I do that. So he's saying, it's a little, you have to maneuver through that. Okay, let's go on. 10.
The cows and the defenseless creatures are my own body. Those whose faculty of judgment has been impaired by their own sin look upon these as distinct from me.
Important sentence. Go ahead.
They are just like furious serpents, and they are angrily torn apart by the bills of the vulture-like messengers of Yamaraj, the superintendent of sinful persons.
The Brahmins, the cows, and the defenseless creatures are my own body. And if you think that they're different from me, then that's your faulty vision. They're the same. They're very dear to me. Okay, so 11.
On the other hand, they captivate my heart who are gladdened in heart and who, I'm sorry about that. Their lotus faces enlightened by nectarine smiles. Respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words. They look upon the Brahmanas as my own self and pacify them by praising them in loving words. Even as a son would appease an angry father, whereas I am pacifying you.
So another thing to consider here is who's the Brahmin in this situation, in this circumstance. The Jai and Vijay could be considered Kshatriya because they're the doorkeepers, they're blocking. So and the Brahmins could be considered the Kumaras. So now he's, this is another way to look at it. So the Kumar, so he's saying one who, even if the Brahmin speaks harshly, like you did, you spoke to the doorkeepers harshly, saying you don't deserve to be here, you should go to the material world. One should respect the Brahmin. So Jai and Vijay. So he's giving instructions to both parties there. Interesting. And 12 is our last verse, correct? Okay, let's do 12 and we'll go back.
These servants of mine have transgressed against you.
You have to put it close to your mouth, please, and thank you. Or speak a little louder.
Not knowing the mind of their master, I shall therefore deem it a favor. Done to me, if you order that. Although reaping the fruits of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long.
And so there's the mercy of the Lord coming in there for Jai and Vijay. In other words, there's a plan. The Lord has a plan. Okay, it's an unfortunate situation that you felt offended, and then you cursed those very dear servants of mine. They did disrespect you. That's true. That all of the factors are there. But can you just do me a favor and allow them to come back soon? If you're familiar with the story, or if this is the first time that you're hearing this story, there are other pieces of information about this story that are not mentioned in the Bhagavatam. The fact that what we're familiar with, that the Lord gave them the choice to come and act as in a friendly relation. He says, don't worry about the curse. If you want, you can take birth 6 times as my friend in a friendly relationship with me, 6 times as a friend. Or if you want, you could take birth 3 times as an enemy and then come back. That detail of that information, that's not in the Bhagavatam per se, as in the verses. Prabhupada will mention it in the purports, but those details are in another Purana, which I'm not exactly sure which one it is. Okay, but they're in another Purana. But then the gatekeepers, they okay, here's your choice, 6 or 3. Well, we want to come back quicker, so let's take 3. So they accepted, okay, we'll take 3 births as enemies. But I don't want to be separated from you in consciousness. So they'd be united with the Lord through anger. Because why? Because the angry person is always thinking of their object that's causing them the anger. So anyway, not the recommended way to get back to Godhead. Okay, just in case someone might think that. Okay, let's go to verse number 6. Thank you. Let's go to that one too. 7. Okay, it's a long prose type of. Yatse vayacharana padma pavitrena. No, what is it? Govinda Adi Purisham Tamaham. Yatse vayacharana padma pavitra renum. Sadhya shatakila malam pratilabdhashilam. Nashrir viraktam apimam vijahatiyasya. Prekshya lavarta itare niyamam vahanti. Want to try? Yat sevaya charana padma pavitra reno. Yat kilamalam pratilabda shilam. Nashir viraktam apimam vijahati yasya. Preksha lavarta itare niyamam vahanti. One more. Yat sevaya charana padma pavitra renu. Sadyak shatakila malam pratilabda shilam. Nashir viraktam apimam vijahati yasya. Preksha lavarta itare niyamam vahanti. I'll just read through the word for word. Yat, of whom, sevaya, by the services, charana, feet, padma, lotus, pavitra, sacred, renum, the dust, sadhya, immediately, shata, wiped out, akila, all, malam, sins, pratilabdha, acquired, shilam, disposition, not Shri, the goddess of fortune, viraktam, have no attachment, api, even though, mam, me, vijahati, leave, yasya, of the goddess of fortune, preksha, lava, arta, for obtaining a slight favor, itere, others, like Lord Brahma, niyamam, sacred vows, vihati, observe. Okay. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord continued, because I am the servitor of my devotees, my lotus feet have become so sacred that they immediately wipe out all sin. And I have acquired such a disposition that the goddess of fortune does not leave me, even though I have no attachment for her, and others praise her beauty and observe sacred vows to secure from her even a slight favor. Want to talk about anything that might strike you in this verse so far? Yes. Any questions that it might bring up? Yes.
It seems kind of cold, even though I have no attachment for her.
It does. That's exactly the point that I wanted to talk about. So I'm glad you noticed it. Because it does. It seems like goddess of fortune, dissonant. You know what I mean? That's not, not the recommended thing. So sometimes things are expressed in a certain way to make a point. That's one thing that can be said. It's not that he has no attachment to her, but he is not attachment to her like we would have, like our attachment would be to some beautiful lady or a handsome man. Our husband is a handsome man, so we're attached to him. We're thinking how much pleasure we can squeeze out from that relationship for me. He's not attached to her in that way. But and he's not attached to anybody in that way. But what is he attached to in his relationships to the devotees? What is he attached to? He's attached to their loving service and attracted by that loving service and bound to them. And that's what he's saying. I'm bound to them by their loving service. I'm bound to them and I'll reciprocate with them in any way at all. So he's kind of making a point, and it might seem like at the expense of the goddess of fortune. He's making a point that I'm attracted by loving devotion. That's what I'm attracted to. And he's just making that point because his relationship is so thick, you could say, with the goddess of fortune. He can say that, and she's not taking it like someone with an ego, a personal and materialistic ego would take it personally. It's not a what does he say? I'm out of here. You know what I mean? It's not like that. But that's how I mean, and it's obviously not just in this verse that he says things like that about, particularly about the goddess of fortune. I'm not attached to her. I'm more attached to the gopis. I'm this and that. Then the example, that other example that kind of like scratch your head. The goddess of fortune couldn't even enter into the Ras dance, even though she tried to enter the Ras dance in Vrindavan with the gopis. She wasn't allowed. And the nuance about why she wasn't allowed was not that she was disqualified in any way, but it was not possible for her to give up her abhiman, her self-conception. I'm the goddess of fortune, in all opulence, in that opulent mood, and it was difficult for her to take on that, making cow patties and et cetera, et cetera. So that mentality was a bar, because what are the gopis praised for in their relationship to Krishna? Why they left everything. They left even the most difficult thing to leave is your conception of morality. They left that aside because for a chaste wife, her dharma, her situation is to serve her husband and her family. They even left that conception of self-identity, moral religious principles, to serve the Supreme Personality of God, not to go off with another person or this, that, not like that, but to serve the Supreme Personality. They were willing to even, anxious, and, without a second thought, gave up everything to participate. And that level of renunciation of conception is what everyone has to do to come to, in order to become so purified that we realize one pointed realization: I'm just a servant of the Lord. I might be in this body and I might have achieved this and that, and I might be that big political person and done this and that, and I might be this big hero that's achieved that and that and this and that. That's not who I am. That's my conception of who I am now in the material world. But we, all of us, every single living entity, their position is servant of the Lord. Okay, so back to the verse. Sorry. You want to start reading the purport? Till I interrupt you probably after the first sentence. Do you have a question or comment? Okay, please.
I think it's really interesting that in the translation it says, like, normally you would most people would worship Lakshmi because of whatever good fortune or wealth or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting that Krishna separates himself and he says, like, it's interesting just the power of Krishna's lotus feet, like just forgetting everything. Yeah. And if you just focus on, like, he's so like self-sufficient that he doesn't need anything. Like that's how I kind of understood it.
Yes.
And the power of worshipping Lakshmi is like, okay, good fortune or wealth or whatever, but the power of worshipping Krishna's lotus feet is like eradicating all sin. So I thought that was really interesting.
Nice. Good point. Thanks for pointing it out. So yes, so for those devotees of Lakshmi, they're asking for, in general, we're speaking in general terms. There's always exceptions and there's always whatever nuances of that. But in general, they're asking for what? They're asking for wealth. Lakshmi is the goddess of fortune. They're asking for wealth, good position, this fame, that's considered, that's considered good karma. Where does karma get you? Good or bad, get you another birth in the material world, the cycle of birth and death. But it's good karma, so you're more comfortable. Great, for that time you're more comfortable, but repeated birth and death means, separated from Krishna, which is our eternal position. So, yeah, okay. Let's go on to the purport. Yeah, thank you.
The relationship between the Lord and his devotee is transcendently beautiful. As the devotee thinks that it is due to being a devotee of the Lord that he is elevated in all good qualities, so the Lord also thinks that it is because of his devotion to the servitor that all his transcendental glories have increased.
Okay, now tell me what that means in your own words. catch the point. In other words, catch the point that's being said there. There's a comparison. But what does a devotee think? Can you go up a little bit? Sorry, Tad. Okay. As a devotee thinks. Okay, as the devotee thinks. So what's the devotee thinking? Yes.
It's interesting that the Lord is humble too. Like the Lord thinks that it's
No,
because
don't go there yet.
Oh.
What's the devotee thinking? Then we'll go to what the Lord thinks. Sorry, you're going ahead. Okay. What's the devotee think, Prabhu?
I'm a devotee, so everything's cool.
Yes, you're right. And there's a little more that he thinks. Why is he thinking everything's cool? Because he's a devotee. Because I'm a devotee of the Lord's so kind. Benedict. Okay. Now, Prabhu, what does the Lord think?
similarly, the Lord thinks that it's because of the devotion of his servitors that his transcendental glories increase.
Yeah. Now say it in your own words.
um,
Digest it.
he's humble,
Yeah.
even though he's the Lord.
He's humble even though he's the Lord. Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
That devotion from his devotees makes him stronger and better.
Yeah. The devotee's thinking, it's because I'm a devotee of the Lord that I'm able to develop good qualities. In other words, the Lord's giving me the strength to develop good qualities. The Lord's thinking, as Prabhupada explains here, and this is another nuance. This is the importance to hear from the pure devotee, because you get the nuances. That's not said in the verse so clearly. But the Lord's thinking, because my devotees have such good qualities, I'm getting stronger. I'm getting pure. I'm better. You know what I mean? Because of them, I'm becoming better. Interesting. Humble. Yes, go ahead. It's not just humility. It's quite amazing.
How does that tie into the Lord being self-satisfied? If he's increasing because of the devotion of the servitors, how is he also self-satisfied and like doesn't need our
Because that's a really good, thoughtful question. Thanks for that. And it can be explained in the sense of it can be explained in the fact that the Lord is neutral. If someone chooses not to serve the Lord doesn't force him to serve him. The Lord lets him play in the material world and accrue his pious and impious credits and act out his desires however he chooses. But when he decides, when that living entity, when that jiva decides to turn towards the Lord will give him all help to make progress gradually. So he is Atmarama. He's self-satisfied. Therefore, he created the material world. He didn't first create the material world, see how to say this, and then stick everybody in it. But because the living entities had the desire to try to enjoy separate, then the Lord created the material world, and the living entities had a place to go. Because in the Vaikuntha planets, in the spiritual world, there's no place for trying to, endeavor after one's personal aggrandizement. There's no place. You don't fit there. So very kindly, he does that. So that's the best as I can explain right now. But those are good questions, and always valuable to ask various people and get the nuances. Advaita Prabhu?
There's a question that I heard before, in terms of him being self-satisfied, yet he is acting and he's very involved. That without Krishna, and this is also what comes up here, without Krishna we cannot, and without us Krishna won't.
Without us, Krishna won't?
Yeah, he won't do it.
Aha.
So, which indicates that we are very intimately
Yeah.
meshed.
Thanks.
Devotees are very intimately meshed with his desire.
Thank you. Thanks for adding that. Okay. wherever we are, let's continue. In other words, right? I think that's where we're at. Okay, someone like to read from there? Go ahead, Joe.
In other words, as the devotee is always anxious to render service to the Lord, so the Lord is ever anxious to render service to the devotee. The Lord,
Again, just a reminder, sorry, this is going to happen a lot of interrupt. That's why it's not bad to read. What's that famous term or name for the Lord? Now he's always interacting with his devotees. He's always reciprocating with his devotees. Bhaktivatsal. Srila Prabhupada says, and it's said in various places, that that's Krishna's most famous quality. He's the lover of his devotees. He's the lover of his devotees. Okay, continue, please.
the devotee admits herein that although he certainly has the quality that anyone who receives a slight particle of the dust of his lotus feet becomes at once a great personality, this greatness is due to his affection for his devotee. It is because of this affection that the goddess of fortune does not leave him, and that not only one, but many thousands of goddesses of fortune engage in his service. In the material world, simply to get a little favor from the goddess of fortune, people observe many rigid regulations of austerity and penance. The Lord cannot tolerate any inconvenience on the part of the devotee. He is therefore famous as Bhaktavatsala.
So how does that sentence, that second last sentence, the Lord cannot tolerate any inconvenience on the part of the devotee. How does that strike you? Want to talk about that for a little bit? Yes.
Back into the whole Jay Vijay thing, like that was what happened to them was an inconvenience personally to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I guess it plays into one and the same pastime, I guess.
Okay. So totally true. Thank you for that. Any other insights or thoughts? I always have a yeah but mind. So I always think, you pass the mic over? Yeah, but what do you mean he can't tolerate the inconvenience of the party? Okay. What's your comment?
First thing that came to my mind was that you have to be really observant to even notice inconveniences, and then you have to care a lot to be bothered by those inconveniences.
Oh, good point. In other words, be observant to notice that other people are being inconvenienced. Yes, that's very personal, isn't it? It's not that we just go around with our head in the air and we walk by suffering and or whatever, or devotee sick and we think, oh, it's your karma. No, whatever. Yeah, we notice and we try to serve. That's personalism, isn't it? Yeah. Also, so one thing that strikes me is that the Lord cannot tolerate any inconvenience on the part of his devotee. So what about, are you not feeling sometimes inconvenienced? Yeah. Yeah, that's the part I wanted to get to. Are you not feeling some inconvenience or some, undue, or, this is too hard or whatever? And why is this happening to me? So what can we do with our attitude there to adjust it to come in line with this? Prabhu?
Maybe think of inconveniences that we take on voluntarily as tapasyas, and just have the mindset that it's for our advancement in our relationship with the Lord.
Yeah, good, perfect. And and for things that don't come under the category of tapasya, or we're doing this voluntarily, sometimes we get inconveniences imposed on us. And let's talk about, see if you talk about.
I was thinking that the word inconvenience here probably doesn't mean from the materialistic perspective, because we with our mind, our conditioned mind, we think of inconvenience in many ways, but Krishna is not dualistic. Like something that seems negative to us is not necessarily negative in his eyes. For example, Jaya Vijaya coming down to earth. So if we think of the inconveniences as arrangements from Krishna for our spiritual life, then they're not actually inconveniences.
Good point. And it doesn't, and the point that I'd like to bring it down to a practical day-to-day level, we're not just talking about devotees on the level of Jai and Vijay and the Kumaras. The Lord doesn't like the inconvenience on the part of devotees, but for us sadhakas, for those of us who are aspiring to make progress on the path of devotional service, sometimes what we consider an inconvenience is the mercy of the Lord in a different, in an inconvenient form or a difficult form or something for our advancement. That's the goal. And that's the thing that we have to remember, because life is full of inconveniences and austerities, etc. You know, life is full of those things. But if we see that this difficult situation is a test for me to maybe give up some preconceived notions of this or that or whatever, but it's the Lord's kindness. He's very kindly arranging this in my life so that I will come closer to him faster. Yes, Prabhu.
I think it's interesting, like the last paragraph says, in the material world, simply to get a little favor from the goddess of fortune, people observe many rigid regulations of austerity and penance. And then the next line says how the Lord can't tolerate inconvenience on the part of the devotee. It's interesting because to me, it lays out or solidifies like how simple the process is, that Krishna's not actually asking for a lot. But there's all these people all over the world that are doing so many rigid, like following so many rigid tapasyas or whatever it is, regulations, to just get a little like favor from like a demigod.
Yeah.
So that's what.
Yeah, and just to extrapolate a little further on that, they're doing these austerities and extra vows and tapasyas, etc., to get a favor from a demigod that will keep them in the material world, keep them separated from Krishna. Will give them some pleasure, maybe, perhaps, you know, some amount of pleasure, but it's insignificant in comparison to the result of the austerities that one undergoes to make advancement in spiritual life, and the result of that activity. Result is incomparable. Yes, Prabhu. Mike, behind you. No, it's coming in front of you, but behind. Okay.
It makes me think that if these devotees are aware of the Lord and his qualities and they perform these austerities to get whatever they want, and then it's almost like he gives his love. They perform these austerities to get what they want, and then they just throw it away. Like, then it's not important. Like, why are you doing all this to get what you want? And then when you have it, you squander it. So it's almost insulting to him. It's like, hey, I gave you what you wanted. I had more to offer, but you asked for this. I gave it to you. And then you just squandered it. So it's like we're wasting our time. You wasted your time with the austerities, and then it makes me think that you're not grateful for I gave you what you wanted, and you're still acting like a brat.
Thank you for that. Another aspect of what you just said is that for non-devotees who are people who are not devoted to the Supreme Lord as a person, for those materialistic personalities trying to get what they want and maybe praying to God in that way or this way, but there's not a personal connection with the Lord, then they're under the control of material energy. So, and it's Krishna says, Yantra Rudrani Maya. The body's a machine. The material world is working in certain ways. You know, there's laws, tit for tat. Do this, you get this reaction. Do that, you get that reaction. It's very mechanistic, the response. For one who attempts or hears about the personality of Godhead and attempts to develop their relationship with him, then or develop love for him, then they're in a whole different position. They're under a whole different energy. The materialistic personalities are under the control of the material energy, and those that are aspiring to become devotees are under the internal potency of the Lord. Internal potency. So what happens to them, which might appear similar, tit for tat, it might appear similar, but it's completely on a higher level of energy and reciprocation by the Lord. And therefore, what happens to a devotee, even a new devotee coming into the process of Krishna consciousness, things that happen to them are not a result of materialistic karma. good and bad karma, but it's the result of the Lord arranging things in their lives, happy things, difficult things, intermediate things in their life, so that they can make progress to in their consciousness, in their progress in their realization of understanding everything is owned, controlled, arranged by the Supreme Lord for our benefit. It's a perspective. It's a change of perspective. And therefore, a devotee can embrace difficulties, not so much for difficulty's sake, but for progress in Krishna consciousness' sake. And I am over time. Hadi. If we're going to get a knock on the door, we're going to go out. Oh, that's true too. Yay. So what do you want me to do? End, right? Do you want to go on with your program? Okay. Thanks. Thanks for the reminder. It was a habit. Okay. Another couple of comments or anything you'd like to wrap this discussion up with? Any takeaways? Yes, go ahead. And
It made me think while you were speaking, it just clicked. It's like you have intelligence because you're worshiping the Lord. So he shows you certain things, and even with your intelligence, you ask for something that's not good. Well, as good for you is what he's offering. So it's like, oh, you have intelligence, but you're not using it. You're silly. Like, and he doesn't.
Yes, exactly.
That's an inconvenience to him. It's like, if I'm giving you something and you're not using it? So
you struck on a really good chord. Thank you. There's a description of that exact scenario in Chaitanya Charitamrita. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Lord says, if I'm so intelligent, if my devotee, being less intelligent, asks me for something that's only going to cause him to ask me for something else and something else and something else, material, then if I'm so intelligent, why am I going to fulfill that desire like that, per se? But let me fulfill that desire in such a way that he won't desire anything else but my lotus feet. So you're using your intelligence to pray to the Lord. That's good. That's progress. But higher than that is to be free from material desire. But on a practical, realistic level, that's not where we're at yet. So it's good to pray to the Lord for this and that and help and this and whatever. Realize his help, but his help comes in different ways than you might expect it, ultimately for your progress. Prabhu.
Was thinking about Lord Ram and in this context of how, Krishna is always there for his devotees. And when Vibhishan came to surrender, well, not surrender, but actually take shelter of Lord Ram, he crossed the ocean, came over. And then, his Sugriva, I believe, and others were like, they said, he's Ravana's brother. Like, there's no way you can trust him. And so at that point, Lord Ram said that famous verse. He said that,
yep, I'm glad you're going to quote it. Go ahead.
Lord Ramachandra vowed. That's another thing about Lord Ram. He'd take vows. It's like, it doesn't matter what happens, he would keep his vow. So Lord Ramachandra vowed, if anyone comes to me and once says, my dear Lord, I'm yours, I'm taking shelter at your lotus feet, I promise for all time to come that I will never leave them.
Hare Krishna. So let's say it together. Just say that, what he prays.
Wait, which phrase? The whole thing? Or?
No, just
my
the
dear
part,
Lord.
my dear Lord.
My dear Lord, I'm
my
yours.
Dear Lord.
My dear Lord. I'm yours.
I'm yours.
I'm taking shelter at your lotus feet.
I'm taking shelter at your lotus feet. Hare Krishna. We can think that all day long today. Shri Ram ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol, Lord Prabhupada, Hare Krishna. Krishna is so kind, huh? To give us all this information.